Jennifer Campbell here, your online systemic leadership mentor. Thank you for downloading my framework about the systemic change leadership journey. And in this video, I will cover step 6 in the framework, and you will learn how to integrate differences and leverage conflicts in your team or organization without wasting a lot of time, money, and energy. Now, with this step, I have helped leaders and professionals in all kinds of change projects to deal with conflicts much more effectively, to move to the next level in their collaboration, and to achieve results. And I've used this systemic approach in all kinds of organizations, such as Ford Motor Company or the municipality of Amsterdam, just to name a few. Now, part of this method includes deep democracy, which is an approach that I learned from a few systemic leadership summit speakers, such as Myrna Lewis, Max Schubach, Yitzke Kramer, and Amy Mandel. Now, there are a few main reasons why leaders struggle with difference and conflicts in their organizations around difference. And let me just name a few. One is that many leaders and managers tend to rule out what's different or deviate from the norm. Now, if you have a team of 10 direct reports and 3 don't do so well and 2 outperform all the others, then who do you focus on? Now, apparently, the 2 who outperform others have, under the same or similar circumstances, valuable information that others do not have because they're able to outperform the others. But most leaders have the tendency to focus on the underperformers, those who do not do so well. In the process, they forget to leverage the positive effect from deviant or different behavior from the 2 top performers. And that is a missed opportunity for the organization. Another reason why leaders struggle is that they don't know how to create environments in which it's safe enough to deviate from the norm or to have healthy conflicts for the sake of the advancement of your organization and the people in it. Now, some leaders welcome the new, but they forget that their people are focused on keeping things as they are. And in that case, leaders add to the sense of unsafety. Another problem that leaders face is that they lack strategies to work with a multitude of stakeholders when dealing with big or complex problems. The more complex or chaotic the situation, the more angles from which a situation can be seen, and the more stakeholders are involved. Now, imagine having to align everyone. That's a difficult task. Then, leaders also do not have effective methods to work with inner survival mechanisms that kick in during change and when people start taking things personally. Now, when people, individually or in groups, are in survival modes, their systems shut down and they don't let anything new or different in. And this leads to not seeing or listening or wanting to be open to new viewpoints, ideas, inputs, beliefs, solutions, and they keep everything other than what they're used to out. Now, if you have this, it's normal. It's a very human tendency. But as a leader, you need to have effective methods to work with this. Otherwise, you need to deal with sabotaging behavior that people show when they feel threatened. And then there's many leaders who also do not understand the systemic notion that situations or problems or phenomenon happen at different levels. So sometimes a manifestation or a problem or something that is conflictuous within an organization is actually an enactment of what's going on in people's personal lives, or it could be a movement that's happening in an entire industry, or it could be a strong expression of a societal issue. And this has to do with your organization as a living human system always has a bigger system around it and smaller systems within it. And these systems all interact and mirror each other. Now, because we are all connected to a multitude of systems at the same time, we mostly unconsciously take all these dynamics with us into the workspace. And so this makes it very unclear to distinguish which problem are we actually trying to solve and how do we approach them then. Now, if any of these problems or issues are familiar to you when it comes to dealing with difference or with conflict, then I would like to show you 3 aspects in this systemic approach that you can use to overcome these issues. And you'll be able to increase your team's or organization's ability to integrate differences and to leverage conflicts. And it's going to save you a lot of time, money, and energy. So here we go. First of all, you need to understand the context. Now, for a context of dealing with difference or conflict, you need to identify the key systems, issues, stakeholders, and elements involved, and also be aware of those who are outside of those or who are around those. And then you need to create a container big enough to include everyone. That's the context. So if your team has an issue or a conflict, then also look at the organization or teams or departments around it. But know that within your team is a conflict and that is the main context, but that it's surrounded by the organization. And then you need to develop an understanding of the different systemic roles that everyone plays within that context. And this has nothing to do with everyone's job descriptions within your team. It has to do with how does everyone add to the dynamics of the conflict within the team. And this has nothing to do with looking at the individuals. It's more at looking at what the patterns are that are within that context. Now, what's also important is to make that context safe so that we can move into the next step and that there are clear boundaries of what we can and cannot exchange and express, so that there's enough safety for the system to then move. Now, understand that problems in systems are actually solutions that systems use to keep on running their patterns. And so when something new and different comes up, you need to focus on why is the system, why is my team moving the way it is? Why is it defending itself? Why is it keeping on running the patterns that it's running? And so focusing on creating a safe and clear context is the first step. Now, the second step is create a process of inquiry and hearing all voices. Now, with this, before everybody starts talking, it's very important to determine where the process will start with the different stakeholders. So will you begin with having them inquire about similarities? So what do we have in common? Or do you focus on the difference in the viewpoints? Now, both starting points can happen successfully or they can happen at the same time, especially when you are using the context of space to visualize where your entire team or organization actually wants to move as a whole. Now, what's important is that all voices are heard by everyone, and especially the ones that tend to be marginalized. Now, voices come from roles of the system, so this is not about individuals who are talking and sticking their opinions to them individually. This has to do with what is happening in the whole of the system, the whole of the team or organization. And can we look at them as expressions of the whole so that we can really hear them? Now, if the intensity goes up and people start moving into a conflict, this usually means that the container in step one, as I explained earlier, is too small or not safe enough, or that voices are not heard. So if it's too unsafe, then it's an indication that people go back into survival mode, as expressed earlier. So then you need to create more safety and bring more neutrality in the room so that every single voice in the system can be heard and be out there. The third and final step in dealing with difference and integrating it and dealing with conflicts has to do with pausing at the things that hit home. So, what were the most heated debates about? What hit home for you and others, and why was that? Where does your system, your team, or organization as a whole want to move with this new information? And this is not about planning just yet. This is just about reflecting and noticing what hit really home. What was the sensitive thing that a marginalized voice said that we did not dare to look at and that we are now willing to do? So, if you are willing to look at the difference that came up, can you then internalize it? Can you make it part of a new pattern that your team or organization needs to develop for it as a whole to move forward? Now, when you start gathering these discoveries, it can also help you indicate in how a new pattern actually needs to be implemented. Because a viewpoint doesn't just come up, it usually comes up with the sense of what is needed to implement it. And because then you can also see, okay, if we need to replace a new pattern, new way of working, a different way of working, then how are we going to address that? Usually when there's a conflict, voices are not heard well. And so that was in the previous stage, and this stage is very important to make sure that everything was said in the second stage so that you can really do the bringing home pattern in the third step. Evaluate the process for learning purposes, because this is going to build the muscle in your team, in your organization, to really deal with something that's different and with conflicts in the long run. Now, of course, you can also, after a while, look at how you're going to implement the new idea or pattern in your organization. Now, this was a whole mouthful, but integrating differences and leveraging conflict is only a small part of really effective systemic change leadership strategies. And so, the systemic change leadership journey is the framework that we use to help visionary leaders really increase their leadership success and changes by 50% in terms of ROI within only a few months. And so this can have a massive impact, and it helps them to take their organizations from surviving to thriving without wasting a lot of time, money, and energy on one-size-fits-all type of change management and leadership methods that really don't work. So if you want to get crystal clear about the one thing that you should be doing right now to integrate differences and leverage conflicts in a systemic way in your organization, or if you want to learn more about the systemic change leadership journey, then book a complimentary call with me. You can do so by clicking the link below. Now, during this call, we'll take a look at your organization and the change and conflict situations that you are dealing with. And then we'll go through this step as well as zoom out to the full systemic change leadership journey. And at the end of our call, you will have your most important strategy to work with in your organization. Thanks so much for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.